singularity. Robbie also was generous enough to tell that he will have time for questions. So please make sure that you think about smart questions to ask, and we will also get hopefully at least one question from our online live stream audience. Slides. I'm going to give an ad, a short point, and a long point, and then we'll have Q&A, so think of the questions. My ad is, I wrote this book a little while ago on what would happen if we had brain emulations, and I claim it is the most detailed analysis of a future technology scenario that anyone's ever done. And it proves that it's possible to do pretty detailed analyses of the social consequences of the future technology. But I recommend it to you, but I'm not going to talk about it now. My short point is about how much are we about to see a huge revolution in AI. So, as you know, over the centuries, and certainly the last century, we've repeatedly have bursts of concern, anxiety, and hope about technological progress, and people have said, are we almost there? Are we almost at the point where machines will replace humans on most all jobs? We're now in such another burst of interest and concern, and the key question is, what's the chances? You could just take the base rates and say, well, you know, the odds of the next one have to be kind of low because we've had a bunch. But if you were to look at what would be the indicator that you would most be looking at to tell you we were about to see machines taking most jobs, it would be the actual impact on jobs. So I want to tell you about a study I did a couple years ago. This was looking at all US jobs from 1999 to 2019, and we had data on the degree of automation of every job in every year. And we could look at that and ask a number of questions. One is, when jobs got more automated, did the number of workers on average change, or the wages on average change? And the answer is no. It did not actually change on average over this period. So on average, there wasn't a net effect on wages or jobs of automation of US jobs from 1999 to 2019. The other more interesting question you can ask is, we took 250 job descriptors from the ONET database and asked, what predicts which jobs are how automated? And did that change over 20 years? So the high-level conclusion was, roughly the degree of automation moved by roughly a third of a standard deviation over 20 years, a modest amount, didn't accelerate. We could predict fairly well which jobs were going to be more automated. Those predictors did not change substantially in 20 years, so there was not a revolution or change in the nature of automation in that period, even though, as you might know, earlier, in this period, people were forecasting enormous changes in automation. 2013, a famous forecast, like within a decade or so, maybe more than half of jobs would be automated. It did not happen, and it was fundamentally not a change either in the nature of automation. The predictors of automation were the same, and this is a list of the top predictors, what predicted which jobs would become more automated. And a key thing I want you to notice is, a big predictor of job automation is whether jobs nearby are also automated. So for example, pace determined by speed of equipment. If something nearby you had to coordinate with, if that was automated, then you were more likely to automate this thing. And that's also true for importance of repeating same tasks, things like that. So a key conceptual model to have in your mind is that automation has been continuing to spread for many, many decades at roughly a steady rate, and a dominant factor in the process is just moving through a network of tasks that are connected to each other, where as you automate a task, you're more likely to automate the nearby connected tasks. And this is a thing that's just going to continue for a long time unless we get a big revolution, which may or may not happen. I'm not betting on it soon, but it's possible. Okay, that was my small point. Now I want to make my big point. That's still filling the time here. So as you know, a lot of people have been concerned lately, expressed a lot of concern about AI and what it could do, and that we should regulate and control it. These are some, representative quotes. You're probably especially familiar about this. We can summarize this, I think, reasonably in sort of a generic fear other argument. That is, generically, people have been motivated by the argument of the form, there's an other, they might get power, they might use that power over us. The more different they are, the more scared of them we should be, so we should stop them from getting power because they might be different than us and have different priorities than us. Very straightforward argument, right? I want to address this in particular and make one key point. So, we are evolved creatures. Not only are we biological creatures where DNA has a long evolutionary history, we are cultural creatures. Humans have pioneered. This is our superpower, the ability to evolve through culture. Both through DNA and culture, the structure of evolution should be a familiar structure to you, but I want to remind you and make sure we get clear on terminologies. There's the idea of a descendant. You are an organism or creature. There will be descendants in the future that are influenced and created by you. You have many features, and inside you there are genes that code for your features, DNA and cultural genes, i.e. memes. You are the net result of these genes coding for features and interacting with your environment. You will have descendants in the future. They will causally arrive from you. They will share many but not all of your genes. Over time, we expect genes to drift, i.e. features to drift. That's the nature of evolution. And in particular, we expect evolution to select for creatures who encode in their genes, cultural or DNA, the following two behavioral habits. One, that they will resist rivals, and secondly, they will help descendants. Both of these should be powerful habits embodied in just behavior, emotions, feelings, etc. And we think about it in a graph of descendants term. The idea is, we all come from some origin, maybe separate origins. We all have different genes. There are other coexisting creatures at the same time who have different genes, and evolution should encode us a suspicion and even hostility of them competing with us for resources, allies, etc., because our genes want to win out over their genes. And that's a natural human tendency. It can lead to racism and war and all sorts of terrible things, but it's a tendency you should expect to exist in yourself and in others, and you should kind of expect it to be hard to eradicate. That is, this is a real, and it's a functional tendency. That is, they have the same feelings about you, and they will be suspicious of you and hostile perhaps, and you should be ready for that. But then farther down the tree, you have descendants, and you should expect an opposite habit toward them. Instead of being hostile and suspicious of your descendants, you should be loving, indulgent, protective. In evolution, in biological evolution, there are species where the young eat the mother. In human cultures, many human cultures have killed or sent off to die their elderly they could no longer support. These are examples of helping out descendants and maybe taking advantage of ancestors. This is also something you should expect to exist in evolution. There might be some exceptions where if a descendant is sufficiently mutant, you don't expect it could survive, you don't expect it could helpfully last, you might not like that particular descendant. Or something that claims to be a descendant but really isn't. Those are descendants you might be more suspicious of, but they're exceptions to the usual tendency that we would indulge and want to protect and help descendants. These are two robust, strong evolutionary tendencies we should believe exist. So let me make an analogy here with space descendants. We are all Earth humans, all of us. Someday there may exist space humans, i.e. humans who are off Earth. You right now could think, space humans will have more in space than on Earth. Space humans could be hostile to Earth humans. Space humans could fight and conflict with Earth humans and even win out over Earth humans. I'm an Earth human, I don't like that. So to prevent space humans from beating out Earth humans, let's prevent space humans. Let's block the existence of space humans. Make sure that if anybody leaves Earth, they're heavily enslaved and controlled, so nobody leaving Earth could possibly compete with Earth. Now, that's a potential attitude you could have, but it doesn't make evolutionary sense because no space humans exist yet, and they'd all be your descendants. So you should have toward space humans, as well as Earth humans, the attitude you would have toward descendants of indulgence, even willing to sacrifice for them. Now, once there are space humans, the remaining Earth humans could then have that rivalry where they were suspicious of the space humans and wary of them, but it doesn't make sense for you as an Earth human now to have that attitude because they're all your descendants. None of them are your rivals. So an analogy is that AI are descendants who will expand into mind space. Humans are at one corner of a vast mind space. Future AI will be in other parts of mind space, and they are our mind space descendants. Most of you have accepted, I think, that your bio-squishy descendants would become more powerful than you, be no more than you, often have conflicts with you, and probably win many of those conflicts later on. That's just the nature of how we expect our bio-squishy descendants to be. And I would suggest that's a natural attitude to also have to your AI descendants. They are literally descendants. They will descend from us. They will share genes in the sense that they will inherit from us many of our features because they will be created in context with us, learning from us. So they are not a rival faction yet. They don't exist yet. That's important to remember. AI of the sort that could compete with us doesn't exist yet. It is a descendant from us at the moment. Later on, when it exists and if there's bio-squishy ones, they may feel rivalrous, but we at the moment shouldn't feel rivalrous because we are all of their ancestors. So evolution does not say to fight everything that's different from you. That's the key message. Evolution might say fight coexisting rivals that are different from you, maybe. Be suspicious, be wary, ready for a fight, but not anything in the space-time that could possibly be different from you, because your descendants are in space-time possibly, likely different from you. So in that sense, basically evolved instincts should favor your favoring, indulging, even taking risks with respect to your descendant AI. So more generally, we can think about factions, ways to divide up the world, and which factions are what I call fertile, i.e. the sort of factions evolution could have promoted thinking in terms of and feeling some sort of suspicion or rivalry along the lines of race, geography, religion, politics. Many potential divisions are plausibly fertile factions in the sense that we might think evolution would promote that. Not that I think you always should act on all of these potential divisions. You should maybe find peace with rivals and not destroy yourself and them in too vicious a fight, but it makes some sense to be wary of some kinds of rivals, but there are other kinds of rivals where it doesn't make so much sense. For example, male versus female. Evolutionarily, given that the way we reproduce, no matter what we do, there's going to be roughly equal numbers of males and female descendants. So it isn't a fertile faction to favor one gender over the other, because evolution just doesn't support that. Similarly, many people think personality types are a mixed strategy where there's more of one than the other. Basically, if you had more, added more to one, other processes would revert back because it's a mixed strategy equilibria. It certainly doesn't make sense to have factional rivalry over generations, to favor your generation over previous or past generations. Neither does it make sense to again, feel rivalrous about space people versus Earth humans, and human versus AI minds is, I would claim, another faction, another way you can divide up the world that it doesn't now make sense to feel rivalrous about, because they're all your descendants. That's the one simple point I wanted to make, and now let's do Q&A.
That's wonderful. So, there is no way that we can make justice to all the curiosity that all of you have, of course. I will arbitrarily pick a few of you, and one of them will be in the front, one of them will be in the back, one of them will be from our online stream. Just one thing before I start. The questions should be short and end with an interrogative, okay? No remarks, please, no mini conferences, short questions, all right? So, I will favor people who didn't speak yet. I already offended Michaela, who was eager to ask a question. So Judith, why don't we go to that lady in the middle? And Randall, I may pick you or not, because you will be a speaker, right? So who knows?
Let's see. Okay, hi. I thought this was a really interesting analysis. Super interested in it. So I want to learn more. And I kept thinking, evolution speaks in behavior. So anytime you have to tell people, this is what this is what you should be doing based on the sense that is made of evolutionary pressures, the question becomes, what evolutionary pressures are making it so that we are not doing that? Right? And so my question to you is, what evolutionary pressures do you think are making it so that we don't see this very thing that you said?
In general, I'm an academic, I'm an economist, and so the world's complicated and messy, and often analyzing the world gives you a simpler, cleaner point of view that helps you see into complexities you would otherwise find, opaque. So when you're in an opaque world you don't understand very well, you will naturally be much more random, much more diverse in your actions. And then if I can help you see it more clearly, you might then do something different. So that's my pitch here. For example, if you're driving through the fog and you can't see something in front of you, you might well hit it. You don't intend to hit it, but you couldn't see it. If I tell you a way to look at things that helps you see more clearly the world you're in and maybe all your habits already, you'll be more coherent. So as economists, for example, we often make the following move: look at your behavior, infer a model of your behavior, and then use your model to actually pick. Because maybe the behavior you would pick, given your model of yourself from your behavior, is less noise, less error, than simply going along with the habits that produced the model in the first place.
Wonderful. And yes, I didn't even need to remark that the answers can be short too, so thank you for that. The shorter, the faster we proceed. I will pick now the question from our online participants, who are a wonderful complement of all of you being here. So, if we are able to emulate specific brains, will economic inequality be amplified? Will the rich and powerful definitively take over?
So it sounds like the question's asking about my book, The Age of M, because it's asking about an emulated mind.
And also the opposition of the factions.
So in Age of M, it's a detailed analysis which gives me enough detail to hang an analysis of inequality on, where in the book I can say some kinds of inequality increase and some decrease. And basically, lineage inequality increases, but per person consumption decreases. So there's different kinds of inequality there. The more general AI case, I'm afraid I don't have enough detail to hang on to figure out whether inequality increases or not. So in order to analyze inequality, you do need to know some things about a scenario. And for Age of M, I could figure out enough things to say answers to that. I'm afraid I don't know what to say more generally in the generic case of there are just descendants.
Thank you. All right. Yep, let's go there, Judith. Oh, you were in the back, thank you. Let's thank Judith, who's running across the room.
Thank you, Robin. I'll make my question very brief. We all know about natural selection, how it applies to biological creatures. But there's a sleight of hand here going on where you're applying natural selection to AI, to mind, as you call mind descendants. How do you apply natural selection to artificial intelligence? How does that pass down? We know how it passes down through animals. We don't know how it passes down from generation to generation of what you call mind space evolution.
So, natural selection is a remarkably simple and powerful theory exactly because it makes very few assumptions at the abstract level about the systems it's describing. Now, basically biological DNA evolution has a lot more structure we can add on, and when we add that on, we can learn a lot more things about how biological DNA has evolved and will evolve. But biological DNA is not the only kind of natural selection. For example, cultural evolution in humans over the last 100,000 years has been a very powerful force, more powerful than DNA evolution, and it doesn't follow the rules of DNA natural selection. It follows more general natural selection principles. So for natural selection to apply, what you need is a competing world of creatures, i.e. not a singleton, and that they have descendants, i.e. later in time there are things that arise from the things earlier in time, causally and sharing many features, and that there was variation in these features and these genetic encodings, the encodings of what they are different, and there are selection processes in the universe which will favor some over the others. And if those conditions are met, natural selection should exist and continue, and therefore I claim that's quite plausible for future AI. It won't be one universal organism. They will be broken into many different parts. The different parts will have causally distinct influences on other parts that descend from them. Those parts will share many of their features, i.e. have genes that are passed down, and the universe will not be indifferent to features. Some features will win out over others, and that is the process of natural selection.
Last question. Raise your hands as high as you can. Okay, there. And she already has the microphone. Okay. And by the way, our speakers very generously don't fly in and then fly out right away after they speak. So feel free to mingle and ask them the questions I didn't think you to ask here afterwards.
If these are the descendants that we are not choosing to have, why doesn't it make sense to think of them as rivals? They're descendants of rivals in that case, no?
Many people have had descendants they didn't like. Right? Parents have had kids they weren't too fond of, maybe even grandkids they weren't too fond of. It's a thing in evolution to not always be so fond of some of your descendants. Natural selection doesn't care. You somehow went and had those descendants, you went and caused them, and natural selection will act on you're causing them to exist, and if you don't like it, oops. So, but if there are particular descendants that you want to disapprove of, then you can try to do that. I'm describing natural selection as a process. It doesn't have to overwhelm everything you do. You could try to defy natural selection in your choices and lives, and you could coordinate with other people to do so, and you might succeed to a substantial extent, or create a singleton that just comes to completely control natural selection, and then natural selection no longer continues because descendants are now controlled by a singleton. That's a scenario I'm a bit scared of, but it's possible, and you may be desperate enough to try it because you so hate the idea of the kind of descendants who would appear if we allow natural selection to continue. But pause and realize how big a risk that you're taking there in that, but yes, that's possible.
Robin, thank you very much.